G'day and welcome back to Wednesday's edition of Kenty Blitz. Kenty Blitz is your afternoon hit of rugby league news from Monday to Thursday. Awesome to see big fan engagement in the YouTube comments on the first couple episodes. Particular thanks to the fella who pointed out that I look like I was having a vasectomy in the first episode, so I'm glad to have fixed that. A lot of people are excited to see Kenty back on the airwaves. If you do have things to say, good, bad, indifferent, please get in the YouTube comments. Don't be too hard. Try and keep it above board, but have a crack at us if you need to. I thought what we do is, Kenty, we're going to start off with what I thought was one of the best questions that came through yesterday. And in the future, when we're rolling forward, we might pick a comment or a question or two and get the people from YouTube involved. David Carroll wrote in, "Hey boys, do you reckon the Knights put a deadline on Dylan Brown to give an answer by Monday when it all came out?" Obviously, the timing has been questioned, so I thought it was a pretty good place to start.
Yeah, look, I don't think there's any deadline put on by the Knights. I think, in fact, if there was a deadline put on, it would have been self-imposed by Dylan Brown himself. He obviously didn't want to get too far into the season with this continually hanging over his head, continually being discussed and pulled apart, particularly while the Eels might be having some questionable results, as we saw on Sunday. I think it was his deadline put on it. He had until round 6 to make a decision, Tom. So the basic premise was, once he had that, it was his decision to make. And the one thing the Knights wouldn't have wanted to do was to try and pressure him into a call. They're under no hurry at any point. There's no difference with Newcastle really now with that money that was sitting there, him making a decision now or him making a decision in round 6. It wasn't like the money was going to go somewhere else and they needed to make a decision, get him to give them a decision early so they could then make their own call. So I think it would have been just on Dylan Brown himself. Look, try and get it done. Try and make sure that once the season starts, it's all over. As I said before, I think he made it last week and just decided to get through Sunday's game before he formalised it and told the club.
Mate, a lot of ex-Knights halves having a lot to say about this call. I noticed yesterday that Mitch Pearce kind of backed Dylan Brown to work it out. Mitch Pearce thought that it was a questionable one, but Kirk Gidley backed him to work it out. For me, that was interesting because Kirk Gidley's probably one of the best footballers who's been forced into the number 7 jersey at the Knights and probably wasn't his strongest position. So that really jumped out at me.
So he's probably sympathising with him. Yeah, look, the fact is, look, Kurt was a utility player. That was his great strength. All his best football was played at fullback. He did come through playing in the halves, but didn't work out for him there. Look, you just can't get past the fact that there is a question mark of whether he can transition from a 6 to a 7. It's a funny thing to say, the way the game is played these days when you're playing left and right so often, and often the 6 is the first receiver on one side and the 7's the first receiver on the other. That said, though, when it comes to actually playmaking and dictating what patterns they run or what plays they put on or where they need to get to on the field before they come back or where they need to get to before they put their calls on, that generally comes down to the halfback to make that decision. Now, I think that's what someone like, say, Matthew Johns was alluding to when he said that the 5'8" are generally a deputy to the halfback. The halfback set the tempo. There's no doubt about that. And the 5'8" are generally a little flourish on the top of that in pure terms. So whether he can make that, I don't know. But, Kirk Gidley's also involved with the Knights too. So I think there's a little bit of...
It'd be pretty strange if he came out and said it was a bad buy.
You don't upset the paycheck, you know what I mean? So once you do that, you're in trouble. So I think Kirk Gidley said the right thing there, and I think everyone else has said the right thing according to where they're being paid.
I think the Dylan Brown thing's been done to death, so we're going to push on to some other stuff.
Let's move on.
Quite a few losers from round 1 that are going to look for a big bounce back this week. You and I were chatting before about the mindset of some of these teams. Let's start with the Roosters. They're going into a big game against Penrith on Friday. How do they try and turn it around, and what will their mindset be going into this week?
Very interesting. There's been a lot of work done at Roosters this week, and what they've done is they've really concentrated on a lot of the technical aspects of their defence. Generally, when you have a problem in your defence, it can be put down to two things. Either technically, the cohesion is not working and guys are getting it wrong as far as how they defend. Generally, when I talk about that, the golden rule there is if you're starting to defend on the edges, whether you go up and in or you slide, which is the two simple ways to explain defence, as a defender, you must do whatever the inside defender does as well. So if he's gone up and in, and you must follow him up and in, you can't slide. The Roosters, they got caught really short on the edges on the weekend. I think what's happened is they've gone away and they've addressed that more than they've addressed their effort. The other part that falls down sometimes defensively is effort. They've addressed the technical aspect of their game. which is kind of a good thing. But again, Victor Radley won't be there this week. They are down on troops. And I really think from Trent Robinson's point of view, it's a real question he's putting to his team this week. I feel sorry for the Roosters from the point of view that after copping such a toweling last week, it would have been nice for them to go away, say, look, acknowledge they had a few problems and say, let's spend the week fixing it up.
Let's play the Cowboys, not Penrith.
Exactly. Penrith are the worst team you could look to try and bounce back from. Now, that said, if you come out and you put a positive effort out there and the game, even if they lose, but if they lose a tight one, a lot of that confidence will be restored. But there's no doubt the Roosters will be down on confidence now, and there's no doubt that another scoreline on them is going to start making people in the playing group start to go, wow, and you can have those little picadillos in the back of your head just saying, what's going on here? And it could cause a real confidence shift in the team. And this early in the season, that's a dangerous place to be.
I was going to say, not only is there the thought of we might be 0-2, and famously, I think the Roosters were 0-3 when they won that premiership in 2002. So you can do well at the end of the year if you lose a couple early. But what I was going to say
You're a Rooster, aren't you, Tom?
I'm not. Maybe. If you were to be 0-2 is one thing, but if you were to be 0-2 off the back of two absolute floggings, that's another thing.
That's the point. If you have two big scores put up against you, that's the concerning part. The one thing you can't really do, like the Roosters had 50 points put up on them, they have another 50 points. It's already a big hole that they're in so early in the season. And I know that everybody's waiting for the troops to come back, but the troops aren't there at the moment. That's why it's a real concern for this. I'm fascinated to see how they respond. I really am. Like if they come back and they're brave and they're competitive and they just stay in the game, that even if they lose the game, that's a positive for the team.
Yeah, definitely. What about some of the other losers? I think one that's jumping out at me or losers from round one, is the West Tigers. There's some immediate press about the fact that Jerome Luai is going to be in the sights of the Eels to replace Dylan Brown. What kind of stuff is that going to do for the morale inside the team going into a big win, a big game for them this week?
Look, everybody's jumped on that, and a few people have had cracks at us saying, it's ridiculous to even discuss the fact that Jerome Luai might be a possible contender. But he will be. I know he signed a lengthy deal at the Tigers, but he's also got a clause that he can get out. So as we know, contracts don't mean anything these days. If he gets to the end of this season and says, you know what, it's been okay, but I'm out of here. And if Parramatta can put a deal to him and convince him somehow that their future is more rosy than what the Tigers is, and actually say to him, listen, you come here and you'll be back playing. You're the missing link, so to speak, for us to play finals football. And they convince him of that, then I'm sure his manager will have the discussion. And once the manager has the discussion, it's a very short trip from there to the player and to convince the player that that's the way they should be moving. It's so fluid these days, the market, that the contracts are there. You can come in, you can sign. I know everybody's looking at Luai as the saviour of the club, but he may not stick around long enough to be able to do that. So I don't know where they're going to go. The Tigers, they had some look, they were okay on the weekend. They competed, but defensively they were still down. Their one-on-one tackles were still pretty poor. More missed tackles than anybody in the competition. And as we've said, to be fair, only up against the Newcastle attack. So it's going to be interesting to see this game this week against the Eels, because both teams were really desperate to try and show their supporters that there's a little bit of life in this season.
The other one I was interested in is the Cowboys and Sharks at 5:30 on Saturday. Both of those teams lost in round one. I think the big news from the Cowboys was that Jeremiah Nanai has been dropped.
Yeah.
He was pretty bang average in defence, and Todd Payton didn't mince his words when he came out about that. What do you expect to see from the Cowboys losing one of their bigger names to reserve grade?
I expect effort. Look, it's too technically. We know Nanai can do what he needs to do. So where he fell down on the weekend was the effort areas, and I think so early in the season there must have already been concerns there from Todd Payton to act so early in the season. He didn't even get a second chance. Nanai, he just one game, one loss. You're straight back to State Cup. But that's good. That's why I like Todd Payton as a coach.
Is that saying that he's slacking off at training and stuff as well? You can't imagine it's just the one game.
I wouldn't say he's slacking off at training. It'd be more the point that he's had things pointed out to him over the summer that he needed to address, and come round one, they weren't addressed. And it's as simple as that. And Todd Payton's a no bullshit coach, right? He sits there, he puts the line in the sand of what's accepted. And from there, if you don't aim up, well, he makes you accountable. He doesn't cuddle his players, Todd. He gets out. He makes them accountable to their performance. And I think in some ways, look, you might look back at this as this might actually help the Cowboys season because there's going to be 16 other players who went out last weekend going, oh, shit, he's serious, this guy. So they know that while he hasn't specifically put them on notice, they know they're on notice. They know he's watching. They know that if any shortcomings he's identified in their game over the summer that they don't address, better get addressed this week.
That bald Melanie he's with the beard combo he's got going at the moment, I feel like if he's going to give a spray to a team, it'd be like delivered with quite a lot of chutzpah. He looks scary when he fronted the press about why Jeremiah was dropped.
He's still got the eyes, hasn't he?
On the other side of that game, the Sharks, I read that they're traveling 40,000 kilometres in the first 9 weeks of the comp. Obviously, that figure is bloated because they went to Vegas. But a lot of away games, and they go to Perth as well in those first 9 games. How much do you think that'll impact them? Will Fitzy be talking about that to them as they kind of build up to this second game?
Oh, look, they're aware of it. That's the first thing. So they're aware of it. And that's where the importance of rest and rehab come into it. So the high-performance guys will be getting that all in place. That said, it's still unsettling. It's not usual. So because of that, we don't really know how they're going to come through. That is a lot of time spent on a plane in 9 weeks of footy, and it can become wearing. That just back on the plane, going through the airports, going through security, waiting at the airport for the plane to board, all those sorts of things. There's just hours eaten up. There's just that's it's not so much the sitting on the plane that's the issue. It's just the hours you use up driving to the airport and going through the airport system and getting at the other end, having to go to the hotel room and all that. Then you got to reverse it on the way home. But I don't know any team that's done this many kilometres this early in the season like that. But we'll wait and see. But I don't think the Sharks will be using it as an excuse.
My initial reaction when I read the article about it was that it's a bit of a beat up, slow news day kind of stuff. But you never know. Like doing a lot of travel, in the days of high performance, a lot of science goes into recovery.
But you're right though, Tom. But the flip side is when you have a team, say like the Broncos, who so consistently play Friday night football, they get their 7-day turnaround. They get in a routine. They get so they know what Monday entails. They know what Tuesday entails. And when you're in the routine, then you can just basically you remove all the distractions in your preparation. You fine tune your distractions because you've done it last week and you've done it the week before. You know what works and what doesn't. Cronulla aren't going to have that opportunity. They're going to be travelling all sorts of any day, Friday night games, Saturday games, Sunday games. They're going to be flying to Perth. They've just come back from Las Vegas. They've just, there's got to be games everywhere where they're travelling. I just don't think that it's really going to be a settling period for them, and it's just got to be. They're going to have to be really careful how they handle it.
They are a team that needs a bit of settle as well. They've kind of had all this promise the last couple of years. Nico Hines won the Dally M a couple of years ago. He slipped off. There's a lot of questions about how he goes in big games. So, yeah, I mean, I imagine it's not the draw that they were looking for when it came out at Christmas. The other big one that we were going to chat about was that Lewis Dodd is being kept waiting. He signed a pretty big contract with the Rabbitohs, but young Jamie Humphries is going to keep his spot at halfback this week against the Dragons.
Yeah.
Do you think that's something to do with the fact that Wayne never actually had much input in the fact that Dodd was coming to the Rabbitohs?
I don't think it's to do with that other than the fact that Wayne doesn't owe him a loyalty to start him in the 7 position. But I also think it's good coaching by Wayne. It's almost that old school coaching at Wayne that we celebrate so much, where the kid that came in and did the job in round 1 did a good enough job to keep it. And that's almost old-fashioned rugby league, where it doesn't matter who's on the biggest pay packet. If you're the guy performing, you hold the job until the other guy either does something compelling in the lower grades or you fail to aim up in the top grade. And Jamie Humphries did enough last week. Lewis Dodd
did more than enough. He looked bloody good.
He looked terrific. He's got a tremendous kick. And Lewis Dodd probably didn't do enough in the trials. And there was a bit of a theory around that he was deliberately being kept within himself during the trials and not let the opposition see too much of how he fitted in. If that's the case, it's probably backfired on him a little bit because he didn't do enough to basically force his way past Jamie Humphries for round 2. But I like it. I think it's Bennett's way of saying to Lewis Dodd, mate, look, we know we've brought you in from England, but that doesn't guarantee you anything. You're here and you've got to compete for your job.
Mate, you've watched a lot of early season footy, trials and early round games. How important do you think trials are these days? In the days where you are doing so much preparation, you're getting your body ready. There's been a bit written about the fact that big names have sat out the trials and they played their first game in round one this year. You know, is the trial something that's going to die out?
Look, yeah, you're right about that. The funny thing is you talk to coaches now and they basically believe that they can replicate game-like intensity in training sessions as far as how quick they move through their ball work, the sort of physical activity they can bring in to replicate the defence and all the rest of it. And they believe they can do that. And I think as we get closer and closer to, this elite sort of model where your top players you're so desperate to have them available for round one, you probably won't want to risk them. And we saw a lot of trials where after 15, 20 minutes, basically the first team ran off. They'd had only 20 minutes of tackling and running. They ran off, and then it was replaced by basically kids outside the top 30 who are all coming in and just looking for a chance to impress. So, yeah, fascinating. The West Tigers want to charge people over $100 to go and watch things like that. That was just robbery. They should be putting a mask on, the Tigers, asking for that sort of money. But the fact is, it could come the day one day where we don't have trials. That we might have those little, I think it was it St. George and Cronulla had a little sort of, was it Manly? One of the teams had a little, might have been Manly and States had like
they had a scrimmage, and then they called it 70% scrimmage. So
70% scrimmage.
Below game intensity, but replicating some situations.
And that might be enough. That might be enough in the future. But interesting that a lot of star players didn't play any trial games.
So I just want to go back to the Jamie Dodd thing quickly. Sorry.
Lewis
Dodd. Jamie Humphries. How does it work with Bennett coming into the Rabbitohs last year? Is he consulted on things like that? Are the coaches that
he wouldn't have been? He wouldn't have been because he wasn't. I don't think he was committed when they signed him. Bennett wasn't committed to coach the Rabbitohs when they signed Dodd. But look, Bennett's old school. Bennett's. What's refreshing about Bennett? He coaches the team he's got. I hate these coaches that come in. I've got a 5-year plan, and it's going to take 5 years to get the roster I need.
Unless Darius Boyd is going to be pulled along and then put in his roster.
Yeah, but he brings a few with him, obviously, here and there, where he can. But this bullshit they carry on about where, look, I haven't got the squad I need. Well, who has? The reason you got the job is because the bloke before you got sacked. Because he didn't have the squad he probably wanted either.
Yeah.
We all want to coach Penrith. We all want to coach Melbourne. That's how the job becomes available. I think it's unacceptable when coaches come in, we need a 5-year plan. I don't have the squad I want. Well, that's just bullshit, mate. This is the squad. You signed on to coach. You go and coach them. And Wayne Bennett, that's what he does, right? Wayne Bennett's gone the full circle as a coach. He's had 18 years at the Broncos to start his NRL career, and then since then he's been having short stints at other clubs for 4 years tops. I think that where he really is right now is he just coaches who's there. He's happy to be coaching, and he just tries to get out of the group that he's got, the best out of the group that he's got.
Sounds like Lewis Dodd won't be winning the Dally M this year. Speaking of the Dally M's, mate, can you explain to me what's doing with the voting at the moment? Yeah. Because there were some things that happened on the weekend that blew my mind.
Well, the big thing and no one's talked about this, Tom. Braden Burns got 1 point in the Dally M's on the weekend. Now, for people who don't know what Braden Burns is, don't need to go out and Google. He plays wing for North Queensland, who got beat 42-12 by Manly on the weekend. How does a winger in a team that's had 30 points put on him get a Dally M point? And you know what shits me? Some years ago, all the Dally M judges, the ex-players, there used to be journalists. Journalists were called dickheads, couldn't judge it. The players sort of revolted against that, said the ex-players are the best people to judge Dally M points. That said, I don't think the Dally M's, they ever really got it wrong before in naming who the Dally M winner was. But the players and the ex-players now are the judges, right? They came in, and what we soon found out was they couldn't handle a little fire to the belly when they came out with some atrocious points given out to players. So what they did is they campaigned to the NRL a couple of years back, and they've now allowed themselves to be anonymous. If you are not accountable to who you give this points for, you shouldn't be judging. That's the thing. Whoever gave Braden Burns 1 point on the weekend a winger in a team beaten by 30-odd points, he should be sacked.
Is there any accountability to these blokes doing the judging?
You don't know who they are. You've got no idea who they. You don't even get who the pool is.
Are they sitting in Are they sitting up with the comm team? Where do they actually?
I've got no idea. I doubt sincerely, many of them would be at the game. I really doubt that. I've been to games where I've seen Dally M judges up in the corporate boxes having a couple of beers with their back to the footy while they're talking to guests.
Maybe they should get the touchies to do it. Your favourites.
I couldn't have got it more wrong. Honestly, tell me how they do. How do you sit there and have these anonymous judges now who've got no accountability? That judge should be called in. Whoever gave Braden Burns at one point should be called in and said, mate, tell me what he did. Explain to me how he got one. So the way it works, Tom Travoy, which is man of the match, the two judges at the game both gave him 3 points. Ruben Garrick, he walked away as voted Manly's second best player. So someone has voted, whoever this person is, has voted that Braden Burns was a better player than Daly Cherry Evans on that day. Go and figure that out. It's embarrassing. It really is embarrassing for the game. It's about time the NRL, if they wanted to take this award seriously, got back involved and said, listen, this is all bullshit. We're not going to take any soft decisions and all this weakness that we're seeing out of judges that don't want to be named. Put your name to who you give the points to. That makes you more accountable. That immediately makes you take more care about the points you're giving out.
Why did it ever change? Because I remember 4 or 5 years ago, Laurie or Freddie would go on the radio the next day and say, I was at the game, I gave 3 points to Daly Cherry, et cetera, et cetera. Why'd they change from that?
They changed a couple of ways. They brought it in from one judge to two judges. I don't know why. They thought it was a fairer system, that you'd have two people looking at the game, and across one game there'd be two judges awarding 3, 2, and 1 each to themselves. So they thought that would end up in a fair result, and essentially they buckled when a couple of the judges complained about criticism they got about their judging and said, okay, we'll keep it anonymous. That was piss weak from the NRL. They should have said, well, okay, you're no longer a judge then. We'll find someone who can at least stand a little bit of fire to the belly, because that's embarrassing. If you can't sit there and justify, that's the point. You've got to be able to justify why you gave somebody points.
Quick poll in the YouTube comments. It'd be good to get Kenty as the next full-time Dally M medal vote. Oh. You like watching the games by TV. You told me yesterday maybe you're going to sit there and be the full-time Dally M voter.
I nearly caused a major incident once at the Dally M's.
Doesn't sound like you.
Oh, I sat there and watched the game, okay? It was the last game of the season. St. George against Newcastle. I think it was St. George. Anyway, Newcastle got beat. But I thought Andrew Johns was far and wide the best player on the field.
For a change.
Yeah, for a change. So I gave him 3 points, even though his team lost. Anyway, come the night, gets down to the final round. Jonathan Thurston's leading by 2 points over Andrew Johns. And I know I gave him 3. I know I gave Joey 3, right? And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be awful. People are going, this is just going to go berserk, right? And I thought, I'm in some trouble here. I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to handle this. So I sat there, and then it came out. The judge in Newcastle, 3 points, Andrew Johns. And all the crowd, because everyone knew Newcastle had been beat, so the crowd just went, oh. And then on the tally, he went to the leader by 1, and I thought, oh, I'm going to have to find a way to explain this.
Still, I want you back, I reckon.
But then Jonathan Thurston got 3 in the final round as well, so he won it anyway. So
everything works out for a reason.
Save the scandal, I tell you.
Couple of good news stories before we wrap up. Cody Ramsey came back in the New South Wales Cup last week after not playing for 2.5 years. That was a pretty cool one to see.
Yeah, wonderful. SEN interviewed him this week, and it was one of the great interviews. It really, people should go down and download it, listen to it. This kid, he had ulcerative colitis, I think was the word. He had his entire large bowel removed. He lost all this weight. He hasn't played for a couple of years. And he tells this beautiful little story about, a kid wrote to him, had the same condition, and he thought, look, if I give up on my dream to go back and return to football, then what message am I sending out to all these other kids that have got the same conditions? So that sort of fueled the fire in him, and now he's back. He's playing lower grades, the State Cup at St George Illawarra.
Scored a try, I think.
Scored a try on the weekend. He still hasn't got back to full playing weight, but the comeback has begun, and look, whether he gets there or not, he's already a winner, isn't he? And that as cliched as that can sound, I just think where he's come from and what he's doing and what he's continuing to do. It's just one of those wonderful stories that pop out of rugby league.
It's unreal. The other one I think that's going to bring warmth to the heart of all rugby league fans is it's back to Belmore round this week.
Yeah.
Doggies obviously did well to knock the Dragons off last week at one of their spiritual homes at Cogra.
Yeah.
The Rabbitohs will be trying to do the same to Dogs this week.
Yeah, and it's a great game to take back to Belmore too. It's an old traditional game, the Rabbitohs and the Bulldogs. And the Bulldogs just find another leg when they play there. There's something about playing at these home grounds like Hard Oval that really inspires something in the players. It really sort of lights something up. And you can see that the Canterbury players respond to the crowd. The crowd, even though it's only going to be 12 or 13,000, because it's a full crowd, they can't get anybody more in. It feels like it's 3 times that size. And so, yeah, it's just another win for rugby league.
I can't believe Kikau plays with a bulging disc between 2 of his vertebrae.
Mate, he could play with one leg and he'd still be formidable.
He's a fair machine.
Yeah, I know.
Brock Jarvis fights tonight.
Yeah, it's Brock
Give
Jarvis.
us one.
Look, I tell you what, you know what's interesting? I thought Keith Thurman would go through him. There's been some reports about he's been a bit poor in camp. The knockout's gone from $1.80 out to $2.20 now, so something's going on. I don't know what's going on. I still think Keith Thurman wins, but that might be him ringing now. Is it Keith Thurman? Just to make sure that we get on top of it. Look, no, I think it's a tough night for Brock. He's gone up a lot. He basically started out as a lightweight, and now he's fighting a junior middle. It's a big jump in weight in a relatively short time, and he's fighting a legitimate guy who's only lost one fight against Manny Pacquiao.
Pretty good mail there from Kenty, and we'll get his tips for round 2 tomorrow. If you're enjoying Kenty Blitz, make sure you get on and subscribe. Get in those YouTube comments. Have a go at us if you need to. Don't go too hard, but it's good to get around those. Kenty, see you tomorrow. Last of the week. It's been a big week.
Been a good week.
Outstanding. Cheers, everyone.